Hey everybody, welcome to Fun with Fallen Flags. This is episode 28. I'm Michael McCarville, and next we're going to work on the Campbell sandhouse. This is kit number 358. So my kit is a little worse for wear. The box is heavily bowed. Could probably make a ship hull out of this. It's also, the sides are kind of bowed too, so it's kind of difficult to open up, but we're going to do it. We'll look at the components real quick and then we'll get started. This is essentially the template page, and you can see for the main house here, the sand bin, and then the tower that mounts next to the main building, which is actually the drying house. So the sand comes into the sand pit, gets dumped there. They send it from there, shovel it into a dryer inside the sand house, and then blowers blow the sand up and into a receptacle that's outside the sand house that is on that tower. So, better picture is this one. So, sand gets dumped here, brought in here, shoveled into a dryer. Once it's dried and the loose particles that are too large are screened out, it is blown through these pipes into this little repository here, and then when the steam engine pulls up, there's a sand dome on top of the steam engine. The hoses that come out of this receptacle on top of this tower, the engineer essentially fills the sand dome with that sand dome from the container that's on top of the tower. So that's the instructions. Let's see what else is in this box that we're going to do. A little packet of sand. Seems kind of necessary. If you've ever built one of these Campbell's kits, you'll know that there's several different bags of parts in it. So there are, in this one, 4 different bags, and it's kind of this, I don't know how to describe it. The paper is really brittle, like you could tear it really easily. It's almost it's not normal paper, it's almost kind of like a rice paper. So there's bundles of parts. There's some cast plastic pieces in here, wood planks, larger wood pieces for looks like the base of the buildings. And then this looks like this one is separate because it's got all the dowels in it for the outside of the sand pit itself. So, and then we have a cardboard piece which is for the roof. So this is modeled after the sand house that's in Durango, Colorado. It was moved recently. Well, not recently, but within the last few decades. And now it's essentially been eliminated. They don't use the sand house anymore. And I think the structure still exists, but with the location where it is storage tracks. So where the sand house used to sit is filled with tracks just for storage for some of the narrow gauge cars that they have. So where the yard used to come into Durango, expand, they had all their facilities, and then come back together as it went north. That area now, there's nothing that goes south, so they have a loop to turn the trains. So there's a large loop that goes around, and where the sand house and the coaling tower and the water tower and all that stuff and the ash pits, all that used to be, is essentially where the loop goes around, cuts through that, and all of that equipment is gone. It's been replaced by front end loaders, or there's a new ash pit that's next to the roundhouse. It's on the north side of the turntable, not the south. So anyway, none of that is relevant to this. So we're going to go ahead and get started. So first thing we're going to do is we're going to build the sand pit, and that's essentially the piece that holds all the sand. So we're going to build that. That's essentially a series of dowels with wood planks that go around it, and then we fill the bin with some material, and then fill the rest of it up with the top of it, cover it with sand so it looks like it's all sand. I'll probably build it up with foam or maybe some plaster or something, instead of building the entire thing out of sand, because we don't have enough. Second phase is build the structure, and then the third phase is to build the tower. So we're going to do it in 3 separate steps. So, all right, let's go. So the sand bin is our first step. We construct that with some scribe siding, supported on the outside by rails that you'll supply, plus some wooden dowels. The dowels at the top are going to have holes drilled through them, and you're going to pass a wire through that so it looks like bolts, and nut bolt washer castings represent the bolt heads. Bend them down slightly so it represents the actual Durango sand bin, and then build up the sand bin with some scrap material, and then cover that with the sand that's provided. And that's pretty much it for the construction of the sand bin. Pay attention to the heights of the posts and the rails. The instructions are pretty accurate, but again, grab some photos if you want. That will definitely help. Also, the wooden dowels, before you weather those, go ahead and scrape them up, give them a little bit of texture, because the wooden dowels are way too smooth. And then a little bit of rust on the rails here and there, and then to the bolt heads will make it look great. Okay, the sand pit is done. It looks good. So we're going to build the next piece of this structure, and that's the sand house itself. Now inside the sand house is a odd looking machine that basically screens out all the particles that are too large and dries the sand so that it's actually usable in the steam engine, so the debris doesn't get into the steam engine, weeds and whatever happens to, because you'll see weeds growing in the sand pit in some old photos. So anyway, the main structure, we're going to build that. It's essentially just 4 walls, a couple of doors in it, and the roof is basically like this steel material. It looks like metal panels, but not corrugated. It looks like flat metal sheets that are put together. So we'll want to weather and rust that really well. Once that's done, we'll build the structure next to it on the far right side. So a couple of tips if you're going to model the actual building in Durango instead of just putting it anywhere you want. Number of these buildings existed, but the one Durango, it had this metal material on the roof, and it wasn't corrugated metal, it was metal panels. So the photos that I saw were probably about 1930s or so. They had metal panels, and they were about 3 foot by 6 foot or so, and 2 panels went and covered the roof vertically. And then there was a total of, let me see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. 9.5 of those to cover the entire roof. So that's that cardboard piece we cut out that was in the original kit. 9.5 panels across. And I just used regular paper, but I spent a lot of time coloring it, painting it rust, and then weathering it. So that's just something to keep in mind if you want to have it resemble. But again, use photos. They're going to get you the detail that you really want. So I also put a lot more weathering on the front side of it than on the back side, just simply because the engine was going to be in closer proximity to it. One other thing I did was on the side door, I put some little marks as if there was shovel marks in there in the sand into the sand bin from the side of the sand house, the drying house. And that looked like somebody was in there shoveling. So it's just a little detail. Probably no one's ever going to notice it unless I point it out to them. But it is something kind of cool and kind of something to add to make it a little bit more like a prototypical building. So just a tip. Okay, and so now that the building is done, the next piece is that structure, which is just essentially two large beams that come up out of the ground. They're actually two beams that come up out, and then larger beams that are bolted to those at the base at the ground level. So it looks like they drove two of them deep into the ground for support, and then that's the foundation. But they're essentially just wood, very large beams, and then the other two go onto those two beams that are in the ground, and then all of the hoses and the piping that goes next to it, and the container that's at the top, that drum that holds the sand, all of that's going to go in the center of it. So pretty straightforward. But when we're building this, I used a lot of photos so I could get not just the template from the kit correct, but also the spacing to look right so that it was accurate with the actual photos of the structure itself. So the kit is very, very accurate. So I will say that. But again, I always have my computer screen up. I always use that to compare everything that I'm building. If I have a photo of it, man, it's great to just be working on something and then look at the instructions. And sometimes it's clear, and other times just be nice to have another photo and just being able to look over and say, oh yeah, okay, that's what I'm building. Very helpful. So, and at the point now, I won't build something unless I can look over and have a reference to it as well, or several reference photos too. So anyway, we'll go ahead and get started on the sand tower itself. Okay, so that's it. We've got our finished sand house. Stained on the bottom, just to make it look pretty. I haven't mounted it to the layout. It might be a little while before I do. I painted it kind of a sand color on the ground. I'm probably not going to texture it until I get it actually ready to place next to the tracks. So that way it kind of gives a little bit of a finished look to it. And when I do texture it, it'll be blend in because it's going to be all the same color of everything else that I use. So looks pretty good. I'm pretty happy with it. It turned out really well. I like the way that the support bars that run between with the nut bolt washer heads make it look like it's actually one piece of metal holding it together. And I think the metal, the rusted roof, looks really good. I'm pretty happy with the way that looks. Now again, I referred to photos a lot when I was building this. So when I look at this and I look at photos, what I see is a building that I'm really happy with because I took so much time making it look like the actual building. I don't necessarily feel that's a requirement for this building or any of the other buildings, but it is nice to sit there and look at it and go, I added metal rails in between the dowels in the exact positions where the sandhouse had them in Durango. But the kit didn't really require anything like that, and it certainly didn't require that the heights were all the same and everything else. So, or you know, the same as the actual photo. So, I'm really happy with this, and I hope you guys throw yourself into a project and spend some time doing a little bit of research, because it's not just the building the kit, it's also the historical research and understanding what the building is, what its function is, and kind of replicating something that was actually used on the railroad to the level that it looks prototypical. It doesn't just look like you threw a kit together, because anybody can throw that kit together in probably, you know, several hours, but this took a long time for me. So anyway, I'm Michael McCarville. I appreciate you guys tuning in. Let me know. Give me comments. Give me a like, dislike, whatever you want to do. Give me some constructive criticism. I'd be more than happy to listen to it and to respond. But other than that, this is the end of episode 28. So thanks for tuning in. We'll see you on the next one, episode 29. Take care.